Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 21 Days of Business. If this is the first time you're catching this video series, welcome. My name is Jasmine Hampton. I'm the founder of coachesandcompany.com. We are your go-to digital destination for all things legal in your entrepreneurial journey. And all through the month of November, we're going to be sharing incredible interviews with guest experts each day, answering your questions as they relate to your business. And today we're talking about what essentials we need and are needed from a branding and design perspective when you're first building your business and brand. Is it just a logo? Do I just need to pick a color? Where do I begin? And what exactly do I need? And joining us today for the conversation is brand strategist and web designer, Jasmine Easter. Thank you for joining me, Jasmine.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited for our conversation today because this is truly the fundamentals, right? This is truly the foundation to
Yes,
a business, a brand, communicating your message, presenting yourself to the world, because we are the platforms we're using, they're very visual, right? And so
yes,
it's a very important thing, but as we're going to talk about today, it goes beyond just that, right? It goes deeper than
right.
that, beyond just the graphics and the visuals and the colors. While they're important and they play their role, there's also more to be considered and to be planned for and thought through. So for those not familiar with you, if you could please share a little bit about you and your work.
Yes, so I am a brand and website designer for female entrepreneurs. Most of my clients are high ticket coaches. They tend to do like one-on-one or group programs, but I do work with service providers all across the board. And so really, I started design about 5 years ago, really just looking to do this full time and really wanted to see what the weak spots were. At the time, I was doing collateral design, really only logos here and there and things like that. But what I realized was that you needed the full picture, right? The full brand in order to actually see success with design. And so that's when I got into branding and rebranding.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm sure you've seen a lot in your time then, because one, entrepreneurship has just blown up in recent years
Yes,
and while you've been in this space. And two is there are a lot of ways, there's no one right way to building a brand, but there are a lot of ways that you can go wrong when you're
for
building it, when you're
sure.
developing your brand and really laying that foundation. And so if we could just kick off the discussion by hearing your breakdown that you shared with me as far as like those three main components to your brand overall.
Yes. So all brands, I believe, need to start with a solid strategy. They need to have a signature style and then finish with a simple sales system. So the solid strategy is really all about that blueprint or those foundational elements for your brand. And really not even design part, but really just the knowledge so you can understand what and who you're designing for, right? So this is all about getting your vision, your goals, your mission. Who are you? What do you stand for? What is your brand story? Why did you start? How do you relate to your audience? And defining your service suite, right? So some people do this as a value ladder. I like to start from like your zero or lowest cost offer all the way to like your high ticket offer. But basically deep diving into each thing and understanding, okay, this is this offer, who is it for, what problem does it solve, why is this valuable, for your audience, and then doing a little competition check to get an idea of what is going on in your industry, right? Not as like a comparison thing, but really just understand what's happening in your industry. Is there a certain look or feel for your industry or an expectation visually that you have
Mhm.
to match or compete with? And then analyzing your audience. One of the biggest things that I like to do is basically say, what are the 3 to 5 words that you want to associate with your brand? How do you want people to feel when they come in contact with your brand? And that's always the game changer when it comes to like making the creative direction really. It's just like, okay, I understand that if I want a person to feel relaxed, right? Or I want a person to feel like I'm trustworthy. Most of the time, those colors are going to be like a soft blue, or maybe nude or neutral colors or
Mhm.
something along those lines. And if you wanted, oh, my brand is like bold, my brand is rebellious, then you would use really bright, really bold colors. So it's really important to understand how you want people to feel when they come in contact with your brand in order to design effectively.
Mhm. Yes, so important because it is so much more than just, what colors do I like? Like, let me
Right.
just my favorite colors, green. I also like yellow and I like a little purple in there. And like, just do they look good together? Do they not? It's more than that. It's like, okay, let's go deeper than that.
Right.
Foundationally, who is it that we're trying to speak to? Who is it that we're trying to deliver a message to? And this is going to be a part of that vehicle in which the message is delivered. So we want to make sure that they're ready
Yes.
to receive that message, or that it's primed for them to receive it, and getting clear on why are we trying to send them? Why are we trying to deliver a message? What is our ultimate goal here?
Right.
So I really appreciate you addressing that. Okay, so we've got the clarity around your mission, around your vision, and then we have
Mhm.
the signature style.
Yes. And so the signature style is really all the things that you see, the things that people love, right? So starts with mood boarding or creative direction, which is really just a group of images. The best mood boards have variety, right? So we have a variety of color, usually a variety of texture, fonts, and just different photos or elements that just bring interest. You want to keep in mind those things about the look and the feel, that you know talked about with your audience, right? So making sure that that is solid, because I
Mm,
know in the design process for me, that is a piece of collateral I reference the most in order to design the rest of the collateral. I reference the
mhm,
creative direction to design logo, to design the logo suite, to make sure I'm designing the website, anything, because I want to make sure that that look and feel is consistent across the board. So
mhm.
starting there, and of course I start on Pinterest. I feel like that's the easiest way to go ahead and create,
Pinterest is so
a group.
good.
Right.
So good. It really is.
And there's so many people who struggle with mood boarding but don't realize they're already mood boarding with their Pinterest board. They just need to add just a little bit more intention, or even grouping things
Mm,
or like things together.
yeah.
Um, and that's the thing too. Like I know a lot of people get confused in that process, but you can just go through and pin a bunch of things, whether they're the same color or not, and then group them later, like group
Yeah, yeah,
similar
yeah.
things and make the mood board from there.
Don't put
And
too much
so,
pressure on yourself.
yeah, because
Yeah,
it can be a hard process. And again, really, as a beginner, the best thing is to just start with everything, literally
yeah.
just start and then go from there. Um, so once you do that, usually you'll start to see like a color palette kind of forming.
Mm,
And then also the same thing with type. You may see that you gravitated towards, more sans serif fonts or bold fonts, or, whatever, and kind of
mm,
grouping that in. I think another good idea is to create two different mood boards with two different looks, and
mm,
kind of seeing what your audience likes the best. I know a lot of people will see people post like on their stories, which mood board do you like the best, when they're in the middle of getting a rebrand, right? To see what naturally gravitates towards their audience. And although
mm,
you may not be paying for a rebrand and you're doing it yourself, you can do the same thing. Like create a variety, see what people like, and see what the people who are already loving your content or loving your business, see what they're already engaging with.
mhm. Yes. I love that tip as far as of course, using Pinterest for the mood board creation
Right.
process to kind of get an idea for like, what do I gravitate towards? What do I actually like? What resonates with my community and with my audience?
Yes.
Um, but I would love to hear from you as far as like actually, because you mentioned this and it's true because I've experienced it too. Sometimes there's difficulty around like, where do I even begin? What should I even search? So like, do you have a preferred, like, what are you searching on Pinterest to have results coming up? Is it about searching like
Mhm.
for color palettes, or searching for brand identities, searching through like is it just looking through anything and any visual, any graphic that jumps out at you, just put it on that board and then
Sure.
sort through those later?
Honestly, so sometimes the process is all over the place.
Mm,
Creativity can be chaotic. So,
yeah.
most of the time, I usually start with my brain already starts going with certain colors.
Mhm,
So it's usually like, okay, I know this person wants a trustworthy brand, and I know that maybe as a coach, right, there are certain things, kind of associated with that photography, which is like, like computers or stationery, things like that. So I might search
mm,
for like blue stationery, and then I'll find stock photos or photos that are in alignment with the kind of blue that I like or what I think I
mhm,
might like, and pin that to the board.
yeah.
Or I would look for like, if someone that wanted, if it was like, oh, I know this is a community, I might look for like brand photos from like an event or like some kind of community-based thing. There's like a group of people, and maybe there are colors in that stick out. So I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should search for these kind of colors in this photo. So I'm usually looking for like 2 to 3 photos that usually stick out to me the most, and then clicking on that photo. And you know how Pinterest will be like, you should add more of these things to this board based on what you already have, and like kind of searching through that. And if I'm looking for a certain kind of font, I'll usually just describe it and then type or font or typography. Usually you can like get away with those 3 different variations to find different things. And then sometimes even just looking for logos in the industry is helpful too, just so you can get a good like gauge as to like what's happening. And so I'll do that as well, just to see, oh, okay, like I might want this kind of font, or maybe this font is used too much in this industry, and I kind of want to stay away from
Stay
that.
away from that.
Yeah.
That's a common thing. I like looking outside of the industry too.
Yeah.
Looking at different industries for inspiration.
Yes, especially when it comes to, oh my goodness, when it comes to like social media collateral, right? Because I feel like we've all kind of seen the same carousels over and over, and we've all seen the same quote graphics over and over. So I think it's cool sometimes to look into different industries. Like I like looking at a lot of like tech stuff, like tech companies and like software companies, and
So
kind of seeing what they're doing.
clean.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
clean, so sophisticated. It feels like it's just like I feel like clean is the only word.
Yeah, it is super minimal, super clean.
Yeah.
And then most of their stuff is like information focused.
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes we get too caught up in the graphics and making them look cute, and it's like we're kind of hiding or like disguising the information, where we really want the information to be the most important thing.
Yes, stand like front and center. That is the focus. Don't worry about what this looks like. At the same time, we do want to maintain consistency and professionalism in the visual ad, because again, it's a very visual world, even beyond just the platforms. Like we live in a very visual world, and we were talking about it before we started the interviews, like creating consistency across in your signature style, in all of your collateral, whether it's what you're sharing on social media, whether you're sharing with clients. If you could share a little bit on that, please, and as far as it relates to building brand recognition and brand awareness.
So, okay, let me just cover the 5 or the
main
elements of the signature style.
I got off track.
We're
I'm
all
just
over the
excited.
place.
Yes. All right. So we got number 2. So
we got
signature style. We've got our
color palette, brand imagery. Brand imagery is the big thing. Logo suite, typography, and then elements. So if your brand has any patterns that are associated with it or icons, which I feel like sometimes in personal branding space, I don't know, I don't feel like we really use as many patterns and icons as like other industries. But those are things that can help you stand out for sure. So those things are things you want to make sure to craft like something signature and unique to you.
Let's recap them, please, one more time.
Creative direction, color palette, brand imagery, logo suite, elements, and typography.
Perfect.
So those are the 6.
Yes. Those design, or as it relates to your design.
Yeah, so making sure, again, always using the same color palette, always using the same typography, and the same thing with imagery, right? Making sure your imagery all has the same look and feel. I think the area that people drop the ball in as far as consistency is that they limit where they're using their brand elements, right? Or where they're using their signature style. There are so many places basically to like reinforce your branding, right? Or reinforce your identity to make sure that you're building that brand recognition. Even on Instagram, you'll see sometimes people use branded story graphics, sometimes they don't. But you have an opportunity, right, to create a branded story graphic. You have an opportunity to make sure you have, templates for your Instagram feed. Even with your highlights, you can, break those down and brand those. And then even beyond that, going into like people have group programs, customized Facebook group header, making sure that you have like custom prompt graphics, or even for launches, like, just making sure that you use your branding whenever and however you can is going to help build that recognition and that consistency.
Yeah, so that when they see that texture or that icon or that pattern or that color palette, that combination of that color with that font, you want them to be thinking of you. You don't want them wondering like, who is that? Or is that that person? Oh no, they just use this, they just kind of look like, we're not here for that. We want to stand
Right.
out. We want to be recognized because, if what you're sharing is unique and your message is unique, you want to make sure that you're identified in that unique
Absolutely.
way in all of
Yeah,
the, and I know it can get to feel very noisy in, social media marketing, in, the branding world, but I think you would agree is the way to stand out is by leaning into the unique parts of your brand and having as many touch points as you can throughout your different business efforts and marketing efforts so that people can interact with the uniqueness of your brand.
right. Absolutely. And then you also have to think too that I know people love looking up to like their industry phases and things like that, but you have to make sure
I'm
that you're
sorry,
doing the things,
looking up to what? I'm sorry.
their industry faves or the person
Oh
their
yeah, yeah,
industry
yeah.
or the go-to person,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's like you don't want to be looked at as the next so and so. You want to
Yeah,
be looked at
no,
as you. And honestly, sometimes that's
that
not even in
part.
alignment with who you are or what you're doing. So you're kind of like confusing your audience by doing that to
Yeah,
begin with. So just make
yeah.
sure you're doing what makes sense for you and your
Mhm.
business and what actually connects with your audience instead of like copying someone else's like website or copying their like graphics or their whole thing. Like that is you're doing yourself a disservice and your
Absolutely.
audience a disservice.
I
So
100% agree.
yeah, you got to make sure you're showing up as you. And I know one of the things too that we had talked about earlier was making sure that those brand photos, if you're going to DIY and not invest in anything, invest in the photos.
Do not DIY these photos, y'all.
Look, you can DIY everything else and like, get your stuff together, but like, please get the photos.
Get
The
the
photos
photos.
literally, they make or break the experience, right? And then you also
100%.
have an opportunity for another level of connection, especially if you're a
Mhm.
personal brand. You have a chance to have a photo shoot, right? That not only looks and feels like you, but gives people that tells a story about who
Mhm.
you are. What does your day to day look like? What does your office look like? What kind of things are you doing? What kind of things are you interested in? Um, and that is just another level of connection. And so when it comes to people really spending their dollars with you, especially when you're looking at visual branding and things like that, it's really about the connection. How do they feel connected to your brand and how do they feel moved to convert after connecting with your brand? And imagery is a large part of that. So if there's
Yes.
anything that you guys take away from this, take that.
That's it right there. Like everybody can benefit from that tip for sure. And that I am in absolute agreement with you as far as the importance of that. That's why we made sure to have a guest as part of our 21 days of business, a brand photographer, someone that has experience shooting personal brand photography as well. And so
Mhm.
if you haven't tuned into that one yet, that's with Victoria Saperstein, and she's a local brand photographer here in Dallas. And she shares some really great tips that actually go hand in hand and really complement Jasmine's tips as well. So I love that. And as far as like with that brand photography, you've said something in the past as far as like identifying, do I need a rebrand? Do I need a refresh? Like well, before we get to that, I would like to cover one thing if that's
Okay.
okay. If we could talk about, there was a third one, right? Did we need to come back to a
Yes.
third thing? Okay, let's come back to that. And then I want to talk about like, depending on what season of business you're in or where you are in your brand evolution and
Mhm.
what makes the most sense for you at that stage. So, okay, we're good. We're staying on track. Let's back up a little bit, please.
Okay, so the last one is really a simple sales system, right? So everyone thinks, oh, you've done all this work, you got these new colors, you have this new everything, these new photos, you built a website or whatever, and you think, hey, people are going to show up, everything's going to sell out. And it's like websites are just not, if you build it, they will come machines. It just doesn't work that way. So the simple sales system is really all about three parts. You have your lead magnet, you have your collateral, and then you have, of course, your website as the last part of that. So basically, your lead magnet, of course, is your opt-in, the thing that talks about your expertise is going to collect leads, and that is on your website. But really, it starts with the collateral, the social media posts, everything that you need to do in order to position yourself as an expert, right? And so we talked about this a little bit with the signature style, just kind of making sure you're putting your signature style in everything that you do,
Mhm.
including your social media collateral and your social media posts. So making sure you have the branded Instagram feeds, the carousels, the quote graphics, literally anything you can think of, even branding your tweet graphics, like some people are doing now, like just making sure that when you post something, it's very consistent with what you've been
Yeah.
doing. Um, and then also, again, highlights, IGTV covers, like there's just so many opportunities to make sure that you're on brand,
Mhm.
and driving people to the website
Mhm.
and making people want to sign up to get the lead magnet, and then having to
Yes.
spend that additional time on your website in order to convert. And so that's really the last step, is just making sure you're nurturing your audience, and not expecting them to just show up on your website and be warm leads, because they're not
Yeah.
most of the
I mean,
time.
I think you've got to, it's definitely a relationship, it's a two-way
Yes,
street. It's a back and forth. And also part of it is supporting those, your people along the way pre-purchase. Like they're
for
not,
sure.
we talk, and this is actually a common theme now that I'm noticing in a few of our different interviews. We talked during the pre-launch period. We talked about it. We talked about it during a few other interviews, as far as like
Mhm.
the person, when a person comes into contact with your brand for the first time, they are not the same person that they will need to be in order to purchase or become a customer or begin working with you. And so
Yeah,
like your part of your job is to support them in that pre-transformation, like from the time they come into contact with you. What do they need to know? What do they need to be aware of? What do they need to learn? What do they need to work through, before working with you? And
right,
where do they need to get to in order to be in a position to make an empowered decision, whether or not what you're able to support them in or help them with is the right fit for them? And so it sounds
yes.
like this is like you putting the bow on top.
Yes, and it's
Yeah.
like taking all that information and making sure that you already have the visuals in alignment. Because I think the other thing too is you don't ever want there to be a disconnect, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
maybe you have this gorgeous Instagram, and then we go to your website, and your website looks like crap. So now
Yeah.
you kind of lost some trust, you lost a little
Yeah.
connection, because it's kind of like what's going on here,
Like, hold on, wait a minute, something's not right.
right? We had this one experience with you that felt really like an experience right on Instagram, where you're you're accessible, I can talk to you, I can connect with you, and then I like, look at everything, and everything is so beautiful, and it makes
Mhm.
me feel this way, it makes me feel that way. And then I click the link in your bio, and it's like, what is happening here?
Wah,
So making
wah.
sure, right, that you have that consistency across the board, that
Yeah.
consistency is really important. And you hear people
Yeah.
talk about the consistency and showing up, right, and the consistency and nurturing your audience and all those things, but also making sure that you're visually consistent so that you're building that
Yeah.
recognition, and also just not confusing your audience.
Yes. The not confusing your audience is a must know. Like you need to be aware of that. You need to be conscious of that and
Yes.
being very clear, like making things simple for them because
Hmm.
they don't need the additional distractions. They don't need,
Nope.
all they need is for you to be clear as to like, who are you? What are you trying to help them with? Why should they listen to you? Why should they be looking to you for help with this solution? And clearly communicating how it is that you can help them. And if there's anything
Right.
outside of that, like, and if there's lacking consistency, like there's just, that's not the position you want to be in. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So whenever it comes to like everyone, we're all in at different points in our journey, right? Some of us, maybe we are in the very early stages of entrepreneurship or beginning, selling a service or selling something online, working with clients online.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, so I know I want to share content. I know I got to share content. I know I'm ready to share content, but like, where do I begin? Because I'm establishing my brand. And then there are some of us that are, been in the game for a little bit, have established a brand at this
Hmm.
point and have consistently put out content, and are, reinforcing our authority and capabilities and skills through sharing of our content and sharing value. Uh, but maybe now it's like, I feel like I kind of could use a rebrand. I know that your suggestion is
Hmm.
like, if you are at the very beginning, you don't necessarily need this like huge brand built out. So what are your tips
Right.
there if you are at that point in your entrepreneurial journey?
So if you're in the very beginning, I say, of course, starting with the solid strategy, or what I
Mhm.
like to call brand blueprint, right? So doing that deep dive on your offers, understanding your audience, the pain points, all of that stuff. That's really important because if you understand what your
Mhm.
audience is struggling with, how are you going to sell to them? Your
You're gonna
offer
be
is
a
not a
mess.
solution, right? So getting really clear on those things, and again, those values that we talked about, those 3 to 5 values, especially
Mhm.
relating to the look and feel and how you want people to feel when they come in contact with
Mhm.
your brand. And then going into that Pinterest board process, right? Creating your own mood boards, going into that. So kind of once you go into making your own mood board, usually by the time you've done the mood board, you understand what kind of color palette you're going for, maybe
Mhm.
give or take 1 or 2 colors, and you're going to understand what kind of type you're going for. So once you find those things, and you can find like fonts, so many websites. Creative Market, I think, is the easiest and most popular like website to go
Mhm.
to. Once you find those things, and then you're like, okay, so now I've done my strategy, I have my creative direction, I have my colors, I have my
Mhm.
fonts. Let me go on Creative Market. You can grab so many different types of templates. If you find a
Mhm.
template, and they have Canva templates on there. So
Nice.
find you a Canva template. It's
Canva
in
is a
alignment,
godsend.
right? Canva
It
has changed
changed
the
the
game.
game. It for real changed. It for real changed the game.
Changed the
It for
game.
real did. Yes.
So you find your templates on there, something that's in alignment with what you're looking for. They have story templates, carousel templates, Instagram, literally everything. And start utilizing those in
Mhm.
your process. And so that way, you have some level of branding, and you'll be able to have the consistency too. So if you're a newer person, that's what I would recommend. And then if you're seasoned and if you're in the place to invest in a rebrand, I say go for the investment. Make sure you're finding the right designer for you. And when I say that, I know some people get caught up in this person has worked with this person, right? So they should be able to work with me. I think the most important thing is look at a designer who designs in a style you already like versus trying
Mhm.
to find a designer and fitting them into a certain box
Mhm.
or design style you like, right? So
Yeah.
finding the right designer for you, um, and making sure the timeline is going to add up with your launch. A lot of these
Mhm.
rebrands take 2, 3, sometimes 4, 5, 6 months, depending on who you're
Yeah.
working with, and a lot of
Not weeks, y'all. Not
right.
weeks. Don't think you're about to get a rebrand in a week or two.
Right. It's a longer process, a bigger investment. And a lot of people are booked out in advance.
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
has to be something you're thinking about ahead of time.
Yes.
Um, but again, the biggest thing is just making sure it's the right style and timeline for you. And then also too, this is someone you're gonna work with long term, making sure you guys vibe personality wise and all that stuff, I think is really important in a project.
Mm.
So if you're ready for the investment, I say go for it. If you're not ready for a rebrand, but you feel like you just want to refresh some things, go ahead and update the brand photos. And maybe you can add in like a color or two, like maybe a pop of color, or like just refresh something in your color palette.
Mm.
Um, I think those are like the easiest ways to go ahead and do that refresh. And then I'll also add the differences. I have an episode on my podcast, I think. I haven't
What
recorded a
is your
podcast.
podcast called?
The Brand Blueprint with Jasmine Easter.
Love
That
it.
talks about being able to tell the like if you need a refresh or if you need a rebrand. If
Yeah.
your branding is causing you to not raise your prices because you don't feel like the actual value of the program is reflected in the visuals, or if you feel like it's like holding you back confidence wise from promoting and things like that, then you need to go ahead and invest in a rebrand. You're
Hmm.
past refresh time. Refresh
Yeah.
is kind of just like, oh, I'm kind of in a little funk about my brand, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just want to, spruce it up a little
Spruce it
bit.
up. Yeah.
Yes, that's refresh time. Rebrand time is like, oh, okay, this is kind of affecting the value, or it's kind of affecting the money, or like literally
Yeah.
affecting, flow in your business.
Yeah.
Then it's
Not
time to
feeling
go
in
ahead.
alignment with it anymore. Not
Yes,
feeling like maybe you and especially if it's your personal brand, maybe you within your brand have evolved since you initially created that brand, created those fundamental pieces of your brand, and you're
right,
like, okay, that's no longer who I am or who we are today as a company.
right. And if you change what you offer, if you
Yeah.
completely kind of change up your service suite, it's like you need a rebrand. A refresh might
Yeah.
not be enough because you've literally changed so much in your business. You need to come out with a new look.
Yes.
So
Yeah. And some of us are there, and that might
yeah.
be those that have like begun to pick up momentum. You've gotten more clarity around who you serve, how you want to serve them. Maybe you've switched up your offer, like you mentioned, Jasmine, and
Hmm.
now you're like, okay, I've also proven the concept. Like it's not like I haven't made a dollar in this business yet.
Yes,
I've worked with a few clients. I've proven the concept. This is in demand. People need my help in this. Let me invest a little bit more in my business. And I
for
love the
sure.
tips you shared around and my brand, but I love the tips you shared around like conducting your own, doing that solid brand strategy, conducting your own mood board development, identifying the colors, the typography, going to source that from Creative Market and other places online, and then using Canva to bring it to life. And
Yes.
it's a worthwhile process for sure, in terms of
Mhm.
professionalism, in terms of feeling confident showing up, being proud of your brand. You want to be proud of your brand too, right?
Right.
Yeah, you don't want that
Right.
to be another reason. That we got enough reasons floating around our heads stopping us from showing up.
Exactly. Exactly. And that was the biggest thing when I first moved into like the rebranding space some years
Mhm.
ago. The biggest thing was that so many women were like, I'm just not confident showing up.
Yeah,
And because I'm not confident showing up, I'm not really in a place to invest. So it's like, okay,
yeah,
we have to start somewhere so that we
yeah,
can, because it's like
yeah.
everyone I work with, even like years ago, before I was like doing it the way that I'm doing it now,
Mhm.
everyone was already good at what they did. They knew what they were doing. It just
Yeah,
takes time to like transition that over to business, right?
yeah,
And transitioning what your expertise is into a sellable service, really. And
yes,
figuring out how like you're figuring out so many things and then trying to figure out how to design on top of that when you already aren't
yeah,
feeling as confident. So
yeah.
sometimes that can be the thing that puts a little motivation in your stuff, like, oh, at least my
Yeah.
stuff looks good and let's go for
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I feel like that's even like as you as a person, like when you look good, when you're dressed nicely and and it's reflective of like your personality and who you are, like you show up more confident, like
Yes.
you just show up feeling good, as opposed to like when you're just sort of like grungy or not really freshened up, not really like ready to show up confident and showing up, like that takes a toll on you. And I feel like that's the same thing, as it relates to your brand and the
Yeah.
way, because that's kind of like your online outfit, right? Like that's the
Yep.
online look, that's the online perception. That's many times the first perception people have of you, because again, and I don't think we can even overstate it. Like our world is so visual, and social media, which is a tool so many business owners use to connect with other people for collaborations, to do business with one another, to connect with their customers and consumers,
Right.
in general, like it's a very visual platform. And so weaving in to every part, every interaction, every piece of content you're putting out there, having that common thread being your brand, like that's a winning strategy in my book.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
For sure.
And it does, because I was literally, as soon as you said like it's just like us, I was literally thinking that same thing.
Yes, yeah. It's
Um,
like when you look good, you feel good.
yes. That's why you see people, you feeling good, you got dressed up. Now it's time to batch the reels because you're feeling good and
You
you're
got to
feeling
make the
confident
content. Yes. Let me show up. Let me get on
about
live,
yourself.
talk to my people real quick, answer
Yeah,
some
so
questions.
same
Yeah.
concept.
Hmm.
And I think it's a lot. The biggest thing again is just to be consistent. So whatever you decide to do, stick with that for a
Hmm.
while until it's really time, to do that refresh or that rebrand.
Yeah.
But if you
Don't
if
switch
you're
it up
consistent,
all the time.
you're good. Right. You
Yeah.
can't do that. You can't have pink and blue this week and purple and yellow next week.
Or
And
adding in a
what is
new
happening?
font,
Yeah,
adding
changing
in
your fonts all
new,
the time, or even just again that consistency thing, right? So maybe on your stories, or maybe you made some story graphics that have this font, but then you're using this font on your feed, and then when I go to your website, you have a whole different font. It's like,
yes.
what exactly is
Something's
happening
not
there?
lining up here. Like
Right,
some the math is not adding up. And
right,
that's the kind of confusion and the kind of thoughts that you don't need your consumer having. Like there's no, what added benefit is there to that? If anything, it's negatively impacting you, and it's negatively impacting your ability to help this person who, like if they're
yes,
coming your way, there might be something you can support them in. And Yeah, it's all about that clarity. Well, I think this was such a great conversation. I so appreciate you, Jasmine. Thank you for sharing your insight and your
Absolutely.
experience. Yes, it's been my absolute pleasure. And I know you hang out on Instagram. So we're going to have your profile tagged here for those that are wanting to connect with you. Is your podcast on Apple Podcasts?
Yes, I believe Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Okay, cool, cool. And it's the brand blueprint. We'll link to that too in the show notes of this, in the description of this. And yeah, is my final question for you, Jasmine, is if there is like a big message you'd like to leave us with related to brand development or not?
The biggest message that I have is really to just understand that connection leads to conversion. Whatever you do within your business, understand that when it comes to your visual brand, it's really about building that connection. And it's that connection that lets people, that causes people to convert.
Yeah,
It's not just about things being pretty all the time, because I think that's the thing that so many people think. I mean, we
yeah,
we like things that look nice,
yeah.
but it's so much deeper than that. And I really encourage you to take the time to really flesh out strategy behind those visuals to understand that that connection leads to the conversion.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I so appreciate you. It's been such a pleasure. And I encourage you to connect with Jasmine on Instagram, check out her podcast, check her out online, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.